So my guest today, I'm very excited to have on. It's Ian Parker. He is an MMA analyst for ESPN, ESPN MMA, and PFL MMA. So, Ian, welcome to my Hot Lip Show. Great to see you.
Thank you. Happy to see you too. Happy to be here. Getting ready to talk about all things MMA. Let's go.
Well, what I want to know, actually, I'm really fascinated by what you do, and I know you do at the betting side of all of the fights. And so, how did you get started in that? Can you just kind of explain how you got started, why you did this, and
So when I was younger, it's funny. My father was big on sports betting. He really enjoyed betting on football, and it kind of got me understanding the space at a much younger age. Which I don't know if that's the best thing for kids per se, but that was just the way it kind of worked out, right? So,
right?
understanding numbers, it was funny. My buddy Mike and I, we were like 6 years old, and his dad and my dad would be telling us like to go write numbers and spreads and parlays on a whiteboard. We had no idea what we were doing, let alone they were calling in bets to their local bookies or whoever it was. Probably wasn't the most legal thing at the time, but that was where it all really, really started. And then throughout, getting involved in MMA, I competed a little bit. I was managing fighters like Chris Weidman, John Vellante, early on, sponsoring guys with a clothing line. But then I started betting on fights. It was just the one sport where I think the odds makers just still, even to this day, don't necessarily have the most obvious clue compared to football, basketball, etc. And I think the moment that kind of got me forward was I tweeted out, it was either a betting ticket or maybe it was even the amount, but I bet really heavy on Max Holloway against Brian Ortega, and it caught John Anik's attention. He found out that I live about 15 minutes from him, and then I started on his podcast, the Anik and Florian podcast, which is now absolutely killing it. And that was where Jonathan Coachman found me. So then that led to the PFL, which led to ESPN, and now betting is taking over the world in every sport, and I'm happy to be the face of.
I wanted to just kind of touch on the upcoming fight with Renan Ferreira and Francis Ngannou. I mean, this has been so heavily promoted, and it's a very big fight. And of course, Francis is coming off kind of a dramatic event that happened in his life, and he hasn't fought. How long has it been? I think a couple of years.
Almost 3 years for MMA. Yeah.
Yes, right. And so I want to know what your thoughts are on that fight. And the betting odds, I think, are for Francis, I believe. Is that correct?
Yeah.
In favor of him.
Yeah, Francis is currently sitting as a 3-1 favorite. And you know what? It's interesting right now because he hasn't fought MMA in 3 years. He's coming off a pretty rough knockout loss in boxing to Anthony Joshua. Mm-hmm. And it's not a knock on Francis. I love the guy. His story is phenomenal. What he's doing for the sport with the PFL, people don't realize what he negotiated and did is
right?
It's just different. What I think people get confused with the PFL too, not to go completely off tangent. The PFL is not necessarily trying to compete with the UFC or beat them because, respectfully, it's not going to happen. And and it doesn't have to happen to be successful, right? What the PFL is trying to show the fighting world is that there's another way to the finish line. There's another professional organization that you're on ESPN, you're on pay-per-view, you can make the same type of money. And Francis opened the door to that, showing people it's not UFC or bust, and it doesn't take away from the UFC's brand. It doesn't take away from the PFL brand. It's just there's another place where you can fight. And Francis just wanted to do more. He wanted to do boxing. He wants to bring MMA to Africa, fully, and the PFL gave him that. So within those negotiations, Francis, I think he still won. We all love to see him fight John Jones in both their primes, of course. It won't happen. It is what it is. But now he's got a literal problema on his hand with Renan Ferreira, who is younger, bigger, faster. This is a tough fight. And people may not look at it as such because they don't look at the PFL as such, maybe, or they don't look at who Renan Ferreira, has he really beaten anyone currently that's top, whatever it is. But
that's the question.
If you've watched MMA long enough, sometimes that doesn't always have to be the case. Sometimes these guys that are not ranked as high or don't fight in the organization, they just happen to have that skill level. And at heavyweight, let's be honest, anything can happen. And for me, with the underdog odds, the way they are at Renan Ferreira, it's really hard to not think that he could pull off the upset here.
I'm leaning towards that way for sure. I think he's got a really good chance. So that's going to be a really interesting fight. I'm really excited about that. And then you've got Chris Cyborg coming back in too, and that should be a very interesting fight as well. So I'm anxious to see Chris back in the octagon. So that I'm excited for that time. But I'm really very excited. I cannot wait for the Ilia Topuria and Max Holloway fight. This is going to be epic. Don't you think? I mean, epic.
It's,
Um,
it's,
I I I
yeah,
love both those fighters. It's so hard not to love both of them and go, oh, I wish they could both win, but I have to pick.
yeah, you know what? I like Ilia Topuria, the fighter. I don't like him as the social media personality. I find him quite annoying and a little delusional. You know, I think he's an incredibly talented fighter. I just wish he would stop the nonsense because, like, look, he beat Volkanovski. He's won the title, hasn't
Hmm.
defended since. His confidence is fine, but it's almost like he's trying to be Conor and then he's talking smack about Conor and whatever it
Yeah.
is. The reality is here, Max Holloway's never been knocked out, right? I don't even think he's been technically dropped. And,
No.
Topuria, I also, it's different. He's playing the MMA math game. Oh, well, Volk beat Max 2 or 3 times, so that means I'm going to beat you. That's not how MMA works. I thought Max Holloway looked the best that he has in probably 5 years against someone who's very dangerous in Justin Gaethje. I think this fight is going to be extremely competitive. More than if anyone's going to wrestle, it's going to be the Georgian in Ilia Topuria. When he
That's
first
how
came,
I felt. Yes.
when he, yeah, when he first came into the UFC, he was wrestle first, strike
Hmm.
second. But since his boxing's been effective, but look, it was against a jiu-jitsu guy in Ryan Hall, where his boxing really showed off. I mean, look, he got the knockout over Jai Herbert, but he also got dropped early in that fight. The boxing
Yeah.
looked good against Josh Emmett. Emmett's not necessarily like a technical boxer, though. He's more of a power guy. So he's going to fight someone in Holloway who's extremely durable. He's going to fight someone in Holloway who's got that cardio, that output to match. If I'm Topuria, I try to wrestle, even though Holloway is very tough to take down. So I am very excited for that fight. I don't mind Ilia's confidence. The cockiness is a little too much for me. It's almost venturing into like the Colby Covington annoyingness situation. But nevertheless, the guy is world class.
Yeah.
And look, if he goes out there and he flatlines Max Holloway, you got a star in your hands.
I know.
If he goes out there and loses to Holloway, then Holloway is just that star can just shine even brighter than it already has. So
Exactly.
I'm very pumped for that fight as well.
Well, yeah, exactly. I think this is going to be a really good one. And like, I think Tapuria has like a 53% submission rate in his wins, and he's 15-0. So if he can get Max on the ground, that's going to be a whole different ballgame, in my opinion. I've never seen Max on the ground. He has an amazing takedown defense, so I don't know if he's going to get him there. I just don't think he's going to get him there. I think it's going to be a stand-up fight. I think they are going to exchange for a long time. I mean, all five, all rounds. I think that it's going to be super interesting
Yeah,
to beat the hell out of each other.
yeah, I think this fight's going to go longer than even Ilia Topuria expects. And honestly, I think if the fight goes deeper, I think that favors Holloway. Topuria went the 5 rounds with Josh Emmett, but that's when you're dominating the full 5 rounds.
Yeah,
People dictate that pace. It's very hard to dictate a pace against Max Holloway, especially if he gets off really early. And if Holloway comes out and fights the way he did against Gaethje, this fight will be much more competitive than what I think people are assuming.
Oh, I agree. I totally agree. I think that's going to be a really interesting fight, and I don't even know what the odds are. What are the odds on that one?
Topuria is a little bit more than a 2-1 favorite currently.
2-1. Okay. So, what's your prediction? Do you have one, or you don't do predictions?
No, I don't really have one yet. Honestly, I think there's more ways to go about playing that fight. I'm waiting for the over-under to come out. I want to see what the wins by decision are for both guys. I really don't see someone going out in this one. If it does happen, I think, if Max is to win by finish, it's going to be in the later rounds. I think if Topuria gets it done, it'll be in the earlier rounds. So I don't really have a prediction yet, to be honest. I do think, though, that this is going to be way more competitive than what the odds are saying.
I think so. I think it's going to be an exciting fight. I mean, I love Max Holloway. He's an incredible fighter. I love watching him. He's exciting. He's just crazy. So when he gets in there, he just becomes a different person.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm anxious. So the next one I think is I always screw up his name. Kashmir Chim Chimanta. What do you say, Kashmir?
Khamzat Chimeav and Robert Whittaker.
Thank you. Thank you. Undefeated middleweight, of course, and he's fighting Robert Whittaker, a veteran. What's your thoughts on this one? I love Robert Whittaker. I like both fighters, but I think Robert Whittaker, he's so likable and so cool, and he's just cool, steady dude, and he gets in there and gets the job done. This will be a really interesting one. I think they're equally matched. What's your thoughts?
It's hard to go about thinking they're equally matched because where Chimaev is great,
Yeah,
not many can match him early on, right? So like with Kamaru Usman almost won that fight because it went further on. So for Robert
right.
Whittaker, if he to win this fight, he's got to get out of round one. Just has to get out of round one. He knows the takedowns are coming. Even though Khamzat's good on the feet, Whittaker, I do believe, is a better striker. He's got good takedown defense. But if you get taken down by Chimaev, it's just a whole different animal. He comes at you 100 miles per hour. It's like he is organized chaos. You know, he just comes forward like a Tasmanian devil, but strategically so. He doesn't throw with reckless abandon. It's all part of his plan. You know, if this was 5 rounds, I would give Whittaker way more of a chance. But because it's only 3, I do think Khamzat will probably get it done. It's just, man, this guy he's a special specimen. We've seen him overcome adversity against Gilbert Burns. We've seen it with Usman. He just hasn't been overly active, and he hasn't been consistent in a single division. So this is going to be his real first test at middleweight. When he fought Usman at middleweight, Usman's not a middleweight. So I don't even consider that a middleweight fight. I consider that a catchweight where it's like, all right, we got 2 cool names. That's fine. This is the real test for Chimaev. If he goes out there and runs through Whittaker, he'll get the winner of Strickland, Dricus Du Plessis, and we'll see what happens. He's not had a lot of luck fighting in the United States. There's a reason why they keep him outside of there. So that's another thing that could be a delay. But I am excited to see where, he hasn't fought in a while. Let's see what he's got.
Well, I was kind of concerned for his cardio, only because he had, the lung infections and all the issues surrounding that. I don't know if they just talk about that, and I don't know if he's got the cardio to go all 3 rounds, with someone as powerful as Robert Whittaker.
Yeah,
What's your
I don't think it's going to be an issue because he went at the full with Kamaru Usman, and I think also with the experience of fighting top level competition, you have to learn to either pace yourself or you have to commit to going balls to the wall in round 1 and just knowing it's either I'm getting it done or I'm not. And I think also when he fought Usman, he may have still had some lingering issues. It's possible. I don't think he's the type of guy that if there are issues, he's not going to fight. It doesn't mean he's not tough, whatever it is. There's other guys who power through that stuff. I don't think he's that guy. So I think because his health is there, because he's okay, I think that's why he's moving forward with this fight.
Yeah, I think so too. So that should be an exciting fight too. And I'm real, and the next, so I don't want to talk about, I think those 2, the main and the co-main are probably the 2 most significant fights there. Dan Egan would be a good one. But the next one, of course, is John Jones, right?
Yeah.
Is that the next one after this is, and Stipe. So everybody's going, is John really going to do it? Tom Espinal is in the wings. He said he would fight whoever was not going to do it. I'm feeling like John's probably going to follow through on this, but what is your thoughts on this fight?
I mean, it's interesting because John Jones and Stipe have both made it clear that they have no interest in fighting Tom Aspinall. It really doesn't do anything for either one of their resumes, right? We're all sitting here saying, well, John should fight Tom because Tom's technically number 1.
Yeah,
but let's be honest here, though. What does a win for John Jones do over Aspinall? We all believe Aspinall could be the next big thing at heavyweight, but he's not yet. He just has 1 interim title defense against Curtis Blades. He hasn't defended it. He hasn't fought anyone since. And again, it does not. The guy's got all the tools to be the GOAT. I really hate the conversation
The
about
total
the GOAT.
goat.
The GOAT changes every 5 years, whatever it is. But
Agree.
I do think that this is a fight that John Jones wants because, number one, it's a very winnable fight for him. And two, he gets to add something to his resume he doesn't have. And that's beating arguably the greatest heavyweight in UFC history in Stipe Miocic. I feel like this fight could happen without a title, but because Jones is the champ, it adds more to marketing and may add more for whatever reason. Because look, at the end of the day, whoever wins this, I think they're both going to retire. I think the only fight that John Jones would do past this is against Alex Pereira because he probably thinks that he can go and wrestle Alex and just dominate there. There's no reason for him to risk anything against Aspinall. There's just none. So as much as it's great that Tom's the backup, my prediction is that Dana doesn't just have a backup fighter. I think he's got a backup fight lined up in case Jones, one of them, because if one of them's out, they're both out. That's just the reality of the situation.
You think so? You don't think that Tom would step in and do it?
No, it's what happened. No, I think Tom will. I don't think the other two are going to. I don't think the other two want to. Stipe hasn't fought in 3 years. He's like 68 years old, and Jones has been out now after an injury for a long time. And look, January you got Los Angeles, you got Vegas coming up in March. So if one of those guys has a little bit of a non-serious injury but doesn't feel 100%, not that crazy to push it back another 2 or 4 months. Not that we want to wait any longer for these guys to do it, but I think Dana's got a trick up his sleeve. I think he knows that both these guys don't care to fight Aspinall for all, I think, the right reasons. People want to say John's ducking him. Okay. So what? If that's the case, it doesn't do anything for him. If it wasn't Aspinall, what if Blades won? Would we all be saying the exact same thing? Probably not. So I do think that as long as both guys are healthy, they will fight at Madison Square Garden.
You mentioned old. Speaking of old, what do you think of Cowboy Cerrone coming on in at?
I want to go back and get 2 more fights. When I retired, I told you I was getting my hair done and getting on steroids. For number 50, been sitting on my mind for a while. So I went over Transcend the last 2 years, taking TRT, a bunch of peptides. Now we got a protocol for all you people like, oh, what if you get on it, you can't ever come off? Well, I now have to come off and piss clean. Fight in a few months. So watch this.
God.
Cowboy Cerrone said he's coming out of retirement.
I hate it.
He wants 2 more fights.
I hate it.
Is that
Love him, hate that. He retired. It's just what for what? What's left to prove? If you want to make money, let's figure something else out. And
I
You know what I mean.
No, I know. I'm with Dana here. I hate it. I don't really get it. Listen, if he needs the money, Dana said we could work something else out, give you something else. And he's been pretty open. He's been on steroids. He's been on everything under the sun. So then he has to go and get clean.
All that.
So the question is, all right, let's say that Dana goes, you know what? We'll just do it. He's got to fight Tony Ferguson or it's got to be against Nick Diaz. I would replace Vicente Luque, pull him from the Diaz fight and do Cowboy versus Nick Diaz.
That might be fun.
If you're gonna have a legends fight, you might, and these guys are gonna risk their brains. You might as well do it against someone else where it's a little bit more even keel. Because Cerrone might feel great that he's on steroids, but if they put him in against someone who's 10 years young, like what if they put Cowboy Cerrone? Because I'm sure he'd probably go to welterweight. What if he fights someone like Joaquin Buckley? Why do we want to see Buckley knock him out, right? So maybe do Cowboy versus Wonder Boy Thompson. That I wouldn't mind. That's okay if you want to have these, aging legends fight each other. But I'm with Dana. Not a fan. I just don't get it. I don't see it. Maybe he's getting the itch because he's bored, but not interested.
So I know you have to wrap it up. I do too. I had a quick question about the trilogy with Dustin Poirier and Gaethje. They need to have another fight, don't you think?
You know what? I think it really depends on the scenario because there are other guys that both can technically fight. You know, look, Gaethje has not mentioned really retirement. He did say he has a few left, but he's taking time off since the Holloway knockout. And Dustin had that idea of that BMF tournament. You know, it's look for Dustin. He's got nothing left to prove, right? I thought he fought way above what people thought he was going to do in the Islam Makhachev fight.
Yes.
And when you're talking about guys in the BMF category, it's just like he's fought everybody, right? So, like, I don't really care to see him versus Conor. I don't think it would be any different. Him versus Holloway, if Holloway were to lose, I guess. Him and Gaethje's an option. You know, the Dan Hooker, all of a sudden Dan Hooker's back in the conversation because Hooker beat Gamrot. I didn't even think he beat Gamrot, you know? And that's not a knock on Dan Hooker. I think Dan Hooker, being that he's ranked number 5, should really focus on trying to get to a title. And I don't think he needs to fight Dustin or Justin to do it. So if the timing makes sense, the trilogy could be there. Both guys finish each other. I mean, look, who's going to say no to that fight? You know someone's going to sleep. It's going to be competitive. It'll be fun. I think, though, if they're going to do that, it's got to be the retirement fight for them. The only other option for Dustin, although I don't think it will happen, is the fight we never got. That's against Nate Diaz. They were supposed to fight. It didn't happen. Nate wants to come back. That's, to me, the mystery guy that I think they could do. You know, and especially if it's in Louisiana, you can make that a main event. So
It'll be fun. Yeah, that would be a really fun one. I love watching Nate Diaz fight. He is just an animal in the octagon. An animal. He makes every fight exciting, and he's got a chin like I've never seen before. So
very
that would be a really good fight. Really good fight. Well, that's fun. That was fun to talk about. I know that you're super busy, and I really appreciate you taking the time with me. This was fun. We have to do it again when we have a little more time. We can yak about a bunch of stuff, but appreciate it so much. I am going to wrap it up today, and just thanks so much for doing this. And we can chat later about other podcasts.
Sure.
Okay.
You got it.
Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up, subscribe, and make sure you turn on your notifications so you get notified every time I launch another video. Thanks for watching.